Dustin, let's kick things off here, my friend, with New York.
Yeah, interesting stuff coming out of New York around responsible gambling. And this has been an issue we've talked about on this podcast and is going to continue to be an issue in states across the country. But responsible gambling is getting a little bit more of a spotlight in New York. The New York Council on Problem Gambling is calling for increased funding and awareness. And if I'm them, this is a great time to talk about this when everybody is thinking about it. New York is getting a lot of money from online sports betting since its launch. The state famously taxed everything at 51%. Right now, $6 million goes to responsible gambling in the state. And what they're asking for now is 3% of all tax revenues to go to their operations. For the past year, for instance, that would up the amount given to responsible gambling to $21 million derived from online sports betting. The crazy part for me is that they're not currently able or capable of having a helpline on 24/7. They're only on 9 to 5. So if that funding is only getting you 9 to 5 coverage on a helpline, you absolutely have to do this. And the other crazy part about this, New York is actually ahead of a lot of states on what it is earmarked for responsible gambling. The fact that it actually said this much money goes here. This is not something a lot of states have done to deal with the influx of perhaps new bettors who are not currently using a regulated sportsbook when they open up online sports betting or casino. So this is kind of it feels like a good moment to have this conversation because of everybody, the regulators in Ohio and Massachusetts are bringing this up. We have the now infamous New York Times pieces. This is coming to a head, and you really want to be ahead of responsible gambling. And New York is making so much money from this that earmarking more money for this only really makes sense. And like if we're doing state hotlines, we're saying, call this number. And if you we all know most games in the sports world, other than on weekends, are starting at night. Like 9 to 5 isn't doing anybody any good. Like if you're thinking about betting or you're having a problem at night, you should be able to get to a helpline. And this seems like the bare minimum we should be doing. And this bare minimum is really probably not being met in a lot of states as well.
Well, Adam, as we know, the research does show that irresponsible gambling happens the majority of the time between the hours of 9 and 5 on business days. We've definitely seen the research that definitely during business hours is when the irresponsible gambling happens.
Well, government being government, they think, all right, well, this is when we're open. Well, government is open 9 to 5. This is when we can afford to staff it, and then that's what we end up with. And obviously, Matt's being appropriately tongue-in-cheek for this. And we look at it now and say, how is it that a state that has the amount of funding that New York does coming out of sports betting is not dedicating the resources that it needs? And I can understand how at the jump, maybe you don't understand just how big the problem can become if it's untouched. Michelle Haddon is the assistant executive director for the New York Council on Problem Gambling, and she told our Mike Mazzio that I think we were pretty shocked last year at the amount that was lost and the people that were impacted. But this really, guys, is the note that got my attention. We definitely saw an increase in calls to our program and people looking for help, including a lot of moms of college-age students. That is the part that needs to be addressed immediately, because that is the part that is getting the most attention nationally right now. We heard about marketing on college campuses. We heard about Barstool's issues in Massachusetts with hosting the show in Toledo. On and on, we hear about the need to protect those who are underage, and not enough is being done with that. And so anyway, whether it's staffing it appropriately with the helpline, whether it is taking more serious action in terms of making sure that college age students who are really not at the decision-making point of their life to be doing any of this responsibly are being addressed appropriately.
Adam, I do want to continue on here with you with a topic that it's like, listen, we're happy to have legalized gambling in all these states. And we say, though, every time something gets done, we can kind of pick at things and go, I mean, guys, what are we doing here? Of course, even when New Jersey went live, we were sitting here going, like, when they say, okay, but no New Jersey colleges, we're just kind of like, okay, I mean, sure, make them go bet on their hometown team with a bookie. I mean, what are you accomplishing by doing all this stuff? So there's always these like kind of head scratching things when it comes to what is allowed and what's not, and what markets are allowed and what are not, state by state basis and things like that. And there is a question for New York, I think.
Yeah, we see this in every state where regulators, sometimes lawmakers, but often regulators, decide what is okay and what isn't. And it doesn't always seem grounded in reality or grounded in any sort of factual basis. It seems grounded in the idea of what we think might be a best practice as opposed to what really might be an established best practice elsewhere. So in New York, there's no betting allowed on awards futures, MVP, Cy Young, Coach of the Year, because the regulations in New York state that no betting is allowed on anything that requires a vote. But let's play this out for a second. Obviously, there are many other places in the country in which awards voting is allowed. And if you really start to think this through about the level of coordination that would have to go into rigging an awards market, and or someone with knowledge of that vote being able to get down any wager of any significant size without tipping off a sports book, it is an infinitesimal sort of idea. Like, it's really just not something that should be a serious concern. Then again, there are states, like you said, like New Jersey, that ban in-state colleges. There are states like Pennsylvania that don't allow betting on the NFL draft. New York is one of those as well. So there seems to me to be a need for a national regulatory discussion. And that was begun last year at the Nickel G's conference, in which they started to get together a group of regulators to discuss issues that were being had across different jurisdictions. And it seems to me that's the sort of discussion that would really benefit the industry as a whole, for those who have certain practices to be able to talk to those who don't and say, listen, this is how we did it. This is how we got comfortable with it. These are the regulations that we put in place to be able to offer the most possible markets in the legal U.S. sports books without causing us concern.
And Dustin, I think one of the things to drive home here that Adam did mention is the reason the whole voting thing and all that, like I in theory, I get why it might spook some people or whatever. But again, to drive home here, you would not be able to get down the type of action on any of these types of markets to be able to fix any type of vote or any kind of anything like that. And then further, if you did get tipped off, let's say it's not even to fix something, let's say you just got tipped off, same difference. Once something starts flooding in or whatever, then again, this triggers things within that we've talked about. The whole point of the legalized market, the whole point of regulation and whatever is we have these people monitoring these markets. And when things start getting all wacky, it puts up a red flag and they get pulled and investigations happen and all the different things like that. And so, again, in theory, I get why you might be a little worried about something that isn't actually happening and played on the field. But in reality, it just doesn't play out the worst case scenario 99.9% of the time.
Yeah, like the limits on these are much lower than on sides and things where you see the large bets. You're not going to be able to get, like you said, you just can't get that much money down on this to make it worth the squeeze. And yeah, I mean, although we have these examples of people of kind of flaunting regulation and the fact that getting caught isn't really worth it. Like, if you have if you're in like internal in any of these organizations and like get the information about this, if you're taking that information, then trying to get that money down on it, that's just such an awful idea that you're going to be out of a job and a career really quickly if you're using inside information on awards to get down hundreds of dollars or spread it around to people. Like, that stuff. Yeah, I mean, again, this is again why we have this, because you're going to get found out at this point. There's no way of getting around this at this point. And again, the benefit, this is a feature, not a bug of the regulated market, is that this stuff can be caught when and if it happens. And I don't think we've really seen that. It's the same as all inside information though. Like, once something starts spreading around, the market adjusts and it gets shut down quickly, or the odds gets taken off the board, or the odds adjust. So.
And Adam, just to kind of put a bow on this, I mean, further, just from a revenue standpoint, let's just be for real. I mean, unless like the super popular choice hits, I mean, these are great revenue drivers for the books as well. I mean, for these sports books, I mean, people love to put in long shot futures tickets on their favorite team and their favorite player and the different things and stuff like that. And it's like, not having that part of that piece of the pie in there. I mean, while it's not near as big as, a standalone NFL game or kind of anything like that or whatever. I mean, it's significant money. And especially when you start to talk about all the different things that you just mentioned. I mean, it's not just football where we're talking coach of the year and MVP and et cetera, but that's in every single sport across the whole gamut there. So it's not insignificant, the amount of money that is actually being turned away here too.
Well, when you play it all the way through in a state like New York that has a 51% tax rate, and you say, okay, well, we're going to be putting up a market that, what would you say a theoretical hold is in one of those markets? 20 to 25%?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part in those awards markets, you're not getting the greatest value, but people aren't really looking at that. They don't really care if Aaron Judge is 7-1 or 8-1. They're going to place the bet for their $20 or whatever it is. And like we've been talking about, when that person walks in the door or turns on the app and tries to get $5,000 down on one of these things, someone immediately is going to say, huh. Yeah. That's a little weird. We probably should look into that more. So the idea that a vote or something that isn't decided by an objective outcome on the field can't be monitored or appropriately regulated is just wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully people are listening. Listen to us, New York. We know some things. We don't know much, but we know some things. And some things we're right about. We're right about this.